ठीक है, I've just clicked on the start streaming button. We should be up and running. I'll always be looking down because the main screen is down here.
Okay.
Okay. But I'll keep looking up a little bit क्योंकि वो stream के दो screen पे ध्यान रखना पड़ता है भाई कि live चल रहा है कि नहीं चल रहा है.
Right.
So we are already live now, but we'll just take
Okay.
1 minute to actually open it, and we'll just wait for. We'll not wait for Praveen because Praveen is outside and stuff. So whenever he joins, he joins. We'll just bring him in, and yeah. मैंने दरवाजा खोल दिया है तो there are lots of like different kinds of insects, moths sticking around up here. तो
चलो इसी बहाने बायोलॉजी भी पढ़ लेंगे.
हाँ. So I think yeah, I'll just begin. Welcome everybody. The stream is live today again, Saturday, but today we are doing it 1 hour earlier because of some stuff that we have to take care of afterwards. Today's stream is actually about the concept of poetry, what poetry means to people, to us personally. We'll share those thoughts and then we'll take the conversation from there and talk about what poetry embodies for us, and probably end in a series of strong opinions that probably will get you thinking about certain things, and also we'll do all the foolhardy that we do alongside it. So Praveen is yet to join us, but I'll introduce the other two gentlemen that are here. I'll start alphabetically so that it's always like correct. Mr. Ankur Chhabra, our esteemed guest, who's always here to help us.
Almost a co-host now.
He is a co-host now. He's taken away all the problems of content. I just come here and I just look at the fucking stream, make sure everything works fine. Mr. Ankur brings in heated opinions and great topics to talk about. Mr. Praveen has also joined. And Mr. Rhythm is with us. Mr. Rhythm has started joining us from the last stream. It is always great to have him. He's been my flatmate, as I've told you earlier. He's a civil lawyer. He's an amazing, well-read person. I want to tell you guys one thing is about Mr. Ankur and Mr. Ankur Chhabra and Mr. Rhythm Buaria is that both of these guys.
Studio shit is stuck. Hello.
Both of these guys are great poets themselves. People that I know, I'm not trying to compare them with stalwarts in this field, but they are amazing. They write such thoughtful words that they kind of make you wonder, what are you doing? Like, because such beauty and taking out time from your regular life, it's just such a creative endeavor which benefits, I think, them and other people as well.
Internet is so fucky.
Yeah, fucky. Okay. And Mr. Praveen is here with us as well. His internet is kind of fucky right now. Mr. Praveen and me, myself, we are the jesters in the room. We'll try to entertain you by whatever low means of dumbassery we can muster. So let's begin. आप लोग कैसे हैं? How was your week? And let's begin. Alphabetically चलते हैं. Mr. Ankur, please.
A, of course.
I think Mr. Ankur Chhabra आ गए. Hi to all the viewers, by the way. Mr. Fahad is here. Okay, that's nice to see. Hi Fahad भाई, कैसे हो आप? अंकुर जी बताएं.
Yeah, sorry, my internet went off.
Same.
तो क्या scene है? Like, what did you say? What did you ask?
I'll say hi to Vandana. Vandana is also here. Hi Vandana. And Ankur ji, मैं आपसे ये पूछ रहा था कि how was your week? How have you been?
My week has been well. I'm preparing for an exam, तो बस सारा दिन उसी में निकल जाता है.
अच्छा.
And then whenever I get time, I read some essays and poetry here and there. Try to explore new writers.
Right.
Along with new music. That's about my day and usually the week. That's how it goes.
Right.
How was yours? आप लोगों की कैसे रही?
Praveen ji, please go ahead. How was your week? We can't hear you, Praveen. आवाज नहीं आ रहा है.
Mute कर रखा था मैंने. And I was like talking well for myself. My week was quite nice, like quite protective. I
Okay.
met a friend's place. Some mast नाश्ते कर
Right.
रहे हैं.
Hmm.
Party.
Amazing, man. Thanks for doing this out of your party time.
I mean,
Um,
of course. Yeah.
Mr. Rhythm, please.
My hair looks good, dude. Hair is in points, you know.
My week was as good as it gets.
That's nice.
Yeah.
I feel like Ankur preparing for an exam, a very different exam. I'm sure.
Yeah.
A much easier exam also, I would think, considering the subject which Mr. Chhabra studies. So I believe I haven't enjoyed studying. That is also because, as I was telling before we went live, well, I
Mhm.
hadn't seriously studied in a long time, and now with the exam looming, uh, I'm enjoying the academic aspects of law,
My
which I
God,
did
my internet
for
is
the
shit.
last 4 years. So the week was pretty much about studying some work here and there. Now that the courts in Delhi have begun
Right.
after their summer break,
Okay.
but I'm still home, and fortunately, everything's happening virtually right now. So I'm just going to enjoy staying at home. I find a lot more time at home to write poetry because
Right.
I have no responsibilities in my home.
Okay. That's amazing. All right then. I'll just open the stage to a discussion. We start with Mr. Ankur again, talking about. So today we're just talking about poetry as I already described. So I want to understand from Ankur when in his life he chanced upon poetry. How did it happen? Or what does he think about poetry? Whatever you want to explain about poetry in your own personal connection, um, maybe a lot. Some people will be able to relate to that as well. So please go ahead.
See, I think for all of us, the first exposure to poetry is in our school books,
Hmm.
and whichever language we are studying, English, Hindi, Punjabi, or any regional language that we are studying. And from the early ages, let's say from fourth or fifth class onwards, one gets exposed to poetry, and then you spend some time reading it, and then the teacher asks you to explain what the poetry means. So I think more or less everyone has their first experience or exposure to poetry at that stage. But for me, the moment when I understood the importance of poetry, when I began to understand the importance of poetry and the power it holds in the world, was when I was 15.
Hmm.
I remember I was in my 10th grade, and I like shamelessly admit that it was my teenage romantic relationship which brought the poet out in me.
Of
I'm
course.
I'm sure everyone goes through it, that phase. So I'm quite grateful for it, and I like talk about it openly because for whatever or on whatever level I am today in terms of writing and understanding poetry is because of that exposure and that experience. So I'm quite grateful for that, and it has been more than a decade now that I have been writing and reading more and more poetry, trying to understand different styles, especially the transition from the structured and the old school or archaic poetry to the more modern and free verse poetry. So I am more comfortable and I find home in the old school and archaic poetry because I feel and I believe that it holds more depth and it makes you think more when it comes to reading a poetry and trying to decipher something from it. See, because the reason is that poetry for me has always been much more than simple words structured in a particular pattern and getting or understanding a message which that specific text is trying to explain. uh, you just write one line and you just break it into few parts and you read it and you relate with it, resonate with it, and you move on. That's what happening in today's time. See, for me, poetry has always been a mode of communication and a framework of putting thoughts and your emotions into a specific structure. So that I believe, and from what I have read and understood and observed till now, based on my limited knowledge, is that the old school and archaic poetry did a lot better job in it, because all the previous text has had those subtleties, those intricacies when it comes to poetry. You can feel and understand the rhythm, the music, not just
Fitness
the
and
message. Rhythm, yeah. Specifically, that was on purpose.
shout out to our boy Rhythm.
So
So I was saying ki, a poetry in general holds a lot more subtleties than just visible text which is trying to imply a message or implore a message on you. So that is on the reader or the listener to delve into that depth. So I think that sums up what poetry is for me and how it has influenced me.
Mm-hmm.
right. अंकुर भाई I'm in love with your words कि फ्रेमवर्क होता है उसको आपके थॉट्स को प्रोसेस करने का फ्रेमवर्क होता है. You write a line and you break it down into several things, the technicality of
Anything
it.
you want. Like it's basically up to you to determine what it is actually.
Yeah. Fahad in the chat is saying that he got into poetry last year, which is amazing. I mean, please
Right.
welcome to this other side. I'm not there, but these other guys are. But Praveen, can you please
Uh-huh.
see the message, because the
Yeah.
background noise
Just a
is
second.
kind
Just
of
a second.
distracting.
Oh, all right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Got it.
Thanks, man. So yeah, it's interesting, भाई. So I want to say to Fahad, please learn. अभी ये लोग बहुत कुछ बताएंगे कि मतलब क्या कैसे करते हैं. I've read your poetry, Fahad. It's great, and probably you'll take today. आप कुछ ऐसे points ले जाओगे जो आपको help करेंगे. So I'll move to Rhythm for now and ask Rhythm कि Rhythm के लिए poetry का
What you
personal.
said right now was poetry in itself. Move to the rhythm.
Ha, by the way, Rhythm's poetry account is Not Writing in Rhythm, which is linked in the bio. So you can visit these people's Instagram and reach out to them if you want to. And also read their poetry. So, Rhythm bhai, please बताएं.
Thanks, Ryan.
Rhythm, you're mute bhai. Mute.
Thanks,
कोई बात नहीं,
Ryan.
कोई बात नहीं, कोई बात नहीं.
Before I, you know, tell you guys what poetry means to me,
Yeah.
I'd just like to tell you how I got into poetry. When did I get into it, and how it has influenced me over the years in the way I look at things and in the way I write also. As Ankur said, all of us were perhaps exposed to poetry around, when we were 10 or 11. And I remember, uh, I think I was in the sixth standard, and
Okay.
we had a poem by William Wordsworth called Daffodils. And that, that till date remains my favorite poem. That's the only poem which I can almost recite out of memory. Uh, and that has uh, the simplicity of that poem has uh, influenced the way I approach writing poetry. That being said, I am nowhere close to William Wordsworth, who was perhaps one of the best romantic poets the world has ever seen. But that's how I got into poetry. So over the years in school, right up till 12th standard, we had really good books and we were exposed to really good poetry. Uh, Unfortunately, uh, for whatever reason, perhaps because uh, it was an English medium school and English was our first language in school, uh, I only read English poetry. I did have as a part of my course Hindi poetry as well, but for for the simple reason that that was not my first language, Hindi poetry did not appeal to me so much.
Right.
And now, the last year or so, I've been trying to get back to Hindi poetry,
Hmm.
or at least translated Hindi poems and
Hmm.
translated Urdu poems,
Okay.
because uh, the expressions which you find in different languages
Hmm.
are not necessarily available across all languages. So
Right.
that has helped me widen my it's basically widen the horizon a little bit.
Hmm.
Uh, and as Ankur said, he is fonder of the older poets, not the contemporary poets. I don't know which period is he talking about or specifically referring to, but I also enjoy the older poets' works a lot more than the contemporary poets. Uh, and one of the reasons I'm repeating myself is that a lot of their poems were very simple. They were very, very simple in terms of the language.
Hmm.
It may have had a lot of depth, it may have had different layers to it, which not every reader would understand. It really depends on how you are reading the text. Are you reading it for the sake of reading it? Are you looking for something in it? Are
Or
you,
are you feeling it?
yeah, are you feeling it? Are you trying to put yourself in the place of that poet to understand why or where or when
Hmm.
did the poet write the poem? So, my approach has always been to, understand from where the poet is writing the poem first. It may not always be possible to confirm that my understanding of what that poet thought is the same because we do not have enough literature around poetry, or rather around when a poem was or in what circumstances a poem was written. In general, the history only bears out the time period during which it was written, and then uh, people, students of poetry, academic students of poetry, actually get into the history of the poet. At that period of time, where was the poet living? What kind of relationships did he share? Uh, what kind of patronage he had? So on and so forth, to understand better what the poem is about. But I believe most of us uh, over here are not looking or do not look at a poem from an academic perspective. It's not an academic exercise.
I
It's
think it's more like a not analytical approach to the thing,
it's
not
an
academic. I would
analytical,
not. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah.
an analytical approach. Sometimes you read a poem which may have multiple layers, but just the first meaning which bears out from the words is simple or it's just good to recite in your head aloud, however you may be reading poetry. And that brings to me, for example, uh, the poem Daffodils brings a certain calmness. I have never seen daffodils in my life. I,
Oh shit.
I've seen photos. I remember the illustration in my textbook beside the poem, but that's the most daffodils I've ever seen. But I still have a feeling that when I actually see them, I will be as thrilled as William Wordsworth was, because just reading that poem, I'm thrilled. I can only imagine how that sight would have been for him. So uh, this is this is how I got into poetry, got interested in poetry. I started writing much later. I think I would have been 17 or 18 when I started writing.
The teenage angst is necessary to write, start writing. Like
I
It's
had
the fuel.
during that period, I was actually writing short essays, and suddenly one day I just thought I'll write a poem, and I wrote one. Uh, but then for a few years there was a very infrequent. It was an infrequent exercise, and I started writing again. I think only in 2016 or late 2015. And it has been such that I write for 2 3 years, and perhaps a year or so, I do not write much. But at least over the last year or so, since 2020, I would say since 2019, November 2019, uh, I've written quite a few poems, and I've written very few which I like. because whenever I go back and read my poem,
Like you're your harshest critic, basically.
I yeah, you're your harshest critic, and
Yeah.
I go back and read, and I'm like this, not worth the paper.
मसाला मसाला नहीं है मसाला नहीं है.
It's not the paper, worth the
I mean,
paper on which it's written, or it's not worth any space in my mobile anymore.
actually, the whole thing is that you grow or change as a person in a very short period of time. To the point, it's very evident in your writing.
Right.
Like तुम कुछ लिखते हो
Or
and then you grow up to be a whole different person and you're like,
right.
eh.
What is it? You may even cringe. I read some
Yeah,
of my
I
poems.
cringe.
And
I cringe at the
cringe.
shit that are written. Yeah.
Like I wrote this. I don't want to write this. I don't want to be associated with this anymore.
Please
So
shoot me right now.
Fahad or anyone else who goes on my Instagram page, I think I don't remember there are quite a few poems because last year for 3 months I wrote a poem every day. Uh, but there are some poems. Please just when you come across them, you'll know that I also would not be want to associated with them. But they are just a
The
part
poem.
of my history. That this is where you were,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and this is not where you want to stay or go back to.
I mean,
You know,
yeah,
all.
it's much like everything else in life. Like the more you do it, you kind of grow at it
Yeah.
to the point you see improvements. Like पहले तुम्हारा डोला इतना था, अब तुम्हारा डोला इतना है. पहले is cringe, right? Oh, welcome to the gun show.
No guns, man. So one thing I wanted to put up here, but even when you do writing, they like I did a course on writing. वो लोग specifically बताते हैं, they tell you that write the whole thing and keep it for a few days. Like I mean, a few months. Come back to it because when you write it and then you come back to it, you realize, oh, this has happened. Because then you grow. After you write something, you vomit something out on like a paper or a machine, and then you come back to it and you look at it. You're able to have a completely new perspective, and so people change in months.
Yeah,
So,
and the things that you write basically serve as a timestamp.
yeah,
Like that is Brian version XYZ,
right,
and now you're something else. You're
right.
like, oh, that was.
Yeah. Praveen bhai, what are your opinions about? By the way, hi Ritik, what's up? My brother is on chat. My mom and dad were watching as well, but they left probably disappointed in their son. कि क्या ये बाल बाल करा रखा है तूने यार क्या है
क्या
ये?
बकवास कर रहे हैं?
So Praveen, please go ahead. Please tell us your tryst, your dance with poetry, मतलब whatever.
तो like I come from a Mallu upbringing, right? तो हमारे में Malayalam poetry had been focused on like at a very young age. मैं क्योंकि जब भी मैं केरला रहता था, I kid who does not know Malayalam much, तो मेरे को सिखाने के लिए my मामा चाची they would like मेरे से ऊपर वाले क्लास के बच्चों के like किताब लेके आके they would just read it to me and make me read it. And मैं वैसे सीखता था. तो उसमें I don't remember, like I have very little recollection of Malayalam poetry, but there was this specific poem I remember. So it basically translates to everybody has problems with their eyes. Everybody has problems with their eyes, but I'm done seeing dull images. I need new glasses. That's it. Like it talks about it's not that simple. I've simplified it too much. उसके अंदर like they talk about poverty. Like I cannot see this kind of poverty. I cannot see people killing themselves. I cannot see people dying because of someone else's fuck ups and XYZ. And to improve that, I'll just get better glasses, like a fresh new perspective on the world.
Wow.
So that was that actually like enticed me to what? Let's see what this shit is. But
Yeah.
I've not really followed up on that much. Like Malayalam में दो चार poetry पढ़ ली है, हिंदी में I've read some. At school में जो पढ़ा है, English में वो तो पढ़ा है. इसके अलावा I've not pursued it much. But I do believe in the like poetic way of life. Like हर चीज में एक वो होता है.
Right.
एक आहा ओ क्या मस्त हुआ.
Yeah.
That's it.
Emotions just come into it, and I remember reading what was that William Wordsworth, The Solitary Reaper, and Robert Frost.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's just the words, and like, they just like reach your soul and like make you feel certain things, and it's just beautiful how a certain arrangement of words can make you feel a certain way. It's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. Same happened with me. I read a lot of books thanks to my the great education my parents provided, and what happened is, yeah, I got into those words. I used to wait कि मेरा next year का किताब कब आएगा poetry का, and I used to read every poem in like the first few days, like finish it, analyze it, revel in it, uh, and it was just amazing. It was just amazing. Also, personally, I started writing poetry again in the angst period that you have, and but my process has always been. Let's talk about process after this. I'll just talk about what my process has been. My process has been कि मेरे को जोर से emotion आता है, right? It just comes up, it
फ्लैट में
surfaces,
हो जाता है.
and it just I vomit it out on paper, and I try to not change it, keep it as raw as possible. So that's how I approached it when I was doing a lot of poetry. Let's start with Mr. Ankur Chhabra. What do you think, Ankur भाई, कि आपका क्या process है, या आपको कब creativity strike करते हो और आप कैसे लिखते हो poetry को?
Well, what I have realized from personal experience and from what I have read of other writers is that you cannot create, and I would like to talk more generally in terms of art, in which poetry, any form of literature work, and music and art and craft, like anything and everything that comes under the umbrella of art. तो मैं वो generally बात करूँगा is that कि you cannot force art out of anything.
Absolutely,
वो
absolutely.
वो जब तक naturally birth नहीं हो रहा है, it's futile to put it out, to even try to force it out of you. That's why I never support all these workshops. No offense, Ryan, the ones that you attended. It's because
That you
no one,
paid for.
yeah, it's because no one can teach you how to create art, or no one can teach you how to create, be it anything.
Right.
What तो दूर की बात आ जाती है, how भी नहीं
But
कोई सिखा सकता. Yeah, sure.
but there is this whole practice thing that exists about art. Like you can get fairly good at art just by just with practice.
See, वो
Like you
practice.
keep repeating. हाँ, there needs to be your own thing. Like तुम्हारे में आग होनी चाहिए तो ही कुछ कर सकते हो about it. But
हाँ,
practice does help.
नहीं, of course practice does help, but वो practice एक individual approach है ना. It's not, it is irrelevant, or it doesn't depend on your surroundings, like as
Yeah,
per
yeah.
se. It's like चाकू को तुम जितना चलाओगे वो तेज उतना ही होगा, because the knife has its own purpose.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. So वो purpose fulfillment के लिए of course practice is everything. मैं अगर लिखना छोड़ दूंगा,
तो
पढ़ना
इस
छोड़
सिनेरियो
दूंगा,
में नाइफ मैं हूँ.
knife is your thing. Like जितना use करोगे उतना sharp होगा.
Right.
So yeah, like from what I was saying ki that you cannot force art out of someone and something. It comes naturally to you. तो मेरा approach भी यही है कि when it comes to me, I force, or like I sit and write only then. It's like कि ऐसा भी हुआ है कि साल में मैं सिर्फ एक ही बार लिख रहा हूँ. ऐसा भी हुआ है कि मैं इन्हें एक साल में कुछ भी नहीं लिखा. And I have been writing for 10 years. Like I have seen my growth, and from where I started and where I am right now is quite a difference. And from what I've read of about writers, I like Rhythm was saying कि हमें उतना easily access नहीं है to understand कि writer किस perspective से लिख रहा है, और what forced him or motivated him to create that piece in the first place. But Rhythm, I would like to mention here कि you can get a gist or an idea about the writer's state of mind or state of emotion when they were sitting by reading their memoirs or their personal letters. Because almost आज के टाइम में जितने भी राइटर्स हैं, उनकी जितनी भी बुक्स हैं about their poetry or their collection, they have their collection of letters as well. The letters which they wrote to their family members, to their lovers, to their partners, to their friends. तो उनमें they have specifically mentioned कि what made them write. Like you all must be aware of Edgar Allan Poe. He was a great 19th century writer, right? So he wrote an essay about it. And उसकी वो first, not first, but like one of the most famous poems is I think The Raven, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
हाँ, तो that is like हाँ, nevermore. So that word that he repeats all the time. So that poem itself is like one of the biggest works of Poe, and he wrote an entire essay about like how he came about that idea, where he got that motivation from. So you have these documents which provide you with that understanding कि अगर एक writer एक बैठ के piece लिख रहा है and it is acclaimed and immortalized through time. So you will get some references to understand where those where that thought has come from. Because most of the times writers do mention in these letters, memoirs, and essays and articles. So that's that. And मेरे case में I write because only out of necessity. Like when I when I'm in that state कि भाई आज creativity वो हो रही है ऊपर जा रही है सिर से and there is something we need to create, I only create then. I don't create for the sake of recognition. I don't create for the sake of poetry. I don't create for the sake of writing something and sharing it with people to make them understand कि भाई देखो मैंने ये लिखा है कि तुम्हारे कितने साथ या कितनों के साथ ये resonate हो रहा है. I don't do for that. I just do it for the sake of creativity and for the sake of creation in itself. तो मेरा approach तो ये है. अब of course when it comes to a writer, there are two things. That one is that कि वो writer objectively लिख रहा है या subjectively. Most of the times the writer has this clear notion कि if I am writing a poem, मैं इसको एक objective way में लिखना चाहूँगा and there is one specific meaning or message which I want to deliver to all my readers and listeners. So most of the cases में ये होता है. There are some cases when the writer is writing subjectively कि मैं उसको एक multiple perspective का एक framework देके I'll just leave it out to the readers and listeners and I'll let them figure out कि मैं क्या बोलना चाहता हूँ. So when I'm in the beginning of the conversation, when I mention about the subtleties, this is one of those subtleties which comes into play into poetry, that a writer is aware of both of these notions of objectivity and subjectivity, and still he combines them together and write it down. So इसीलिए you see a lot of people pursuing these degrees in literature where they just sit and analyze and try to understand. Of course, like I am not big on criticism or criticizing any creation altogether, not just writer's work, because uh, when a critic is criticizing someone's work, it is coming out of the limitation of that person himself. It tells about the limitation of that critique's knowledge, that critique's empathy, and his openness to different perspectives. Like Rainer Maria Rilke, if you are aware of him, he has a book called Letters to a Young Poet, which is like an amalgamation of certain letters he wrote to a young poet. It is highly recommended book. Like it is one of my favorite books, and in that, I think in first or second letter itself, he mentions कि criticism is the lowest, or like the cheapest or the lowest thing that you can provide to a form of writing or a text. So I totally agree on that thing, and I totally have that perspective that criticism is never good, or it isn't even a part that should be there for someone's work. वही बात होती है, as Praveen was saying, you are your biggest critic, and that is true because that happens subconsciously to you. That is why you see people who write or create any form of art or literature, they are never satisfied. Like मेरे case में भी, if I'm writing something, I don't feel happy or satisfied with it कि यार आज मैंने अगर साल में एक ही चीज लिखी है, इससे भी मुझे कुछ satisfaction नहीं मिली, but I don't force myself to rub it off entirely. At least I have gave a framework or a structure to that thought or emotion which I was having, and maybe I'll come back to it later and refine it, but at least I have it documented in a way कि वो मेरे idea clearly मेरे पास रहेगा.
Rhythm, do you have a point here?
No, I was just trying to remember this book which Ankur mentioned.
Right.
Letters to a Young Poet. It has really good snippets, not just for poets, but for in general, as Ankur said, anyone who creates any form of art. I think it's a must read. It's not very big. There are only, I don't remember how many letters, but I heard it on Audible, and it was a couple of hours of letters. That's about it.
It's 70 to 90 pages.
Yeah,
certainly plugging Audible here.
Do you have a link,
Not much,
Rhythm? Do you have a link that you want to share?
I can share my login details with you.
Oh.
Okay, please do. I love audiobooks.
Acha, by the way, please let me interrupt here, guys. Okay. Yeah. So Vandana was. I asked her in the chat what she thinks about the thing about creativity that came up. Vandana says, as Ankur said, nobody can teach you art. Practice matters, but it has to come naturally. So she's also an artist, visual artist, and you should go out and check out her Instagram. I'm going to put that Instagram in the chat right now. I can never force
Subtle
myself to.
flag again.
Yeah, I can never force myself to start an artwork. That's what she's saying. So also Fahad is saying art cannot be judged nor criticized. That's his viewpoint on. So one thing that I've been feeling very negative about the topic, वो ये है.
Ankur cheekega. Ankur is gonna scream right now,
बस
dude.
बस
Look at him.
No,
बस.
He's
I
like,
just, I just wanted to, I just wanted to mention one
Please
thing.
go ahead. Please go ahead.
Like John Keats said this one thing. John Keats is my favorite poet.
Wow. Yeah.
So as Rhythm was saying, he got more exposure to English poets. Same with me. Maybe Hindi literature. I'm more, not more, but I am getting more aware of Hindi and Hindustani literature altogether for the past 2 years now. After moving to Hyderabad and getting exposed to different cultures, especially in poetry and ghazals and all the Sufism, तो मैं उसमें अब ज़्यादा dwell हो रहा हूँ. But like initially and even now, I mostly write in English only. Hindi में I have written a couple of poems, and Punjabi mein I have written only once. So John Keats has had that influence on me, like Rhythm was saying that Wordsworth has the impact on him. So John Keats said one thing, that poetry comes as natural as leaves to a tree, or it shouldn't come at all. So I live on that philosophy by generalizing poetry to art. That art comes as naturally as leaves to a tree, or it shouldn't come at all.
That's a great point actually, अंकुर भाई. बट मैं एक नेगेटिव पॉइंट बोलना चाहता था जो मुझे लग रहा है कि फहद भी कह रहा है, बट आई वांट टू फाइट अगेंस्ट दिस एंड रादर से दैट feedback is not bad, but I think that I'm coming from a more of a perspective where
ad
yeah,
agency.
yeah, probably that, or something of that sort. But I don't know. I mean, why should no? But I'm able to answer that question myself. प्रवीण, अभी मैं तेरे से पूछता हूँ क्या तेरा पर्सपेक्टिव है, बट आई अंडरस्टैंड कि आप कुछ लिख रहे हो तो उसका एक अलग होता है, और कोई चीज़ आप बना रहे हो या कोई प्रोडक्ट पे आप काम कर रहे हो उसकी कोई चीज़ होती है, वो एक अलग तरीके का फॉर्मेट ऑफ क्रिएटिविटी और फंक्शन, उसका फंक्शन ही अलग होता है. सो आई काइंड ऑफ आंसर्ड माय ओन क्वेश्चन हियर. व्हाट डू यू हैव टू से अबाउट दैट, प्रवीण?
So, like what I actually think is कि criticism is not really a bad thing, I would say. Okay. So if you are putting your thing, like anything that you wrote or anything out there, ठीक है, तो the criticism is also valid, क्योंकि जिस बंदे ने पढ़ा वो उस बंदे का एक पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू है इस चीज के बारे में.
बट आई
तो
थिंक
अगर तुम एक मिनट जस्ट एक मिनट, अगर तुम कह रहे हो क्रिटिसिज्म बुरा है, तो दैट इज यू बीइंग क्लोज्ड अप टुवर्ड्स दैट गाइस पर्सपेक्टिव. समझ रहे हो? And that's the whole thing. Like criticism is necessary. अगर नहीं criticize करना चाहते, if you don't want criticism, you don't just post it. That's why I've not posted anything. I'm like, no, I'm good. I am good. Thank you very much.
right.
Yeah, please.
So I wanted to move quickly to. I had some points, but in because Rhythm has not answered the question yet about what his process is. So I'll just move on to Rhythm and talk about his process, because otherwise this will stretch. This one particular point will stretch for too long. Rhythm, bhai, please.
So, like Ankur said, quoting John Keats, that the best way to express yourself is when it comes naturally, rather than squeezing it out of you just because someone else is doing it, or just because you told yourself that I have to do this every day of my life. Uh, I don't know how professional writers work through such phases when they have absolutely no inspiration or motivation, what they call the writer's block. I don't know how they work through it. For them, it's even more essential because they are going to, it's their bread and butter. For me, poetry is only a manner of expression. Uh, I don't need to do it every day in any case. I don't even need to do it frequently. I write it as and when it comes, and it comes from the inspiration comes from the most varied sources. For example, earlier this week I was watching Abhijit Banerjee. He's an economist. Uh, his interview with
Not to
Karan
mention
Thapar.
Nobel laureate.
No, yes, just after he had won the Nobel Prize, he was on an interview with Karan Thapar, and thrice in an interview of 48 minutes, he said that so economists are not good at reading tea leaves, or I am not good at reading tea leaves, Mr. Modi maybe, or so on and so forth. And the phrase is reading tea leaves has stuck with me ever since. I've been wanting to write something about it, but nothing yet has come naturally to put it on paper. But it's just stuck there, reading tea leaves. Uh, Another thing he said in the interview, and I watched the interview twice because the reading tea leaves thing stuck with me. And when I watched the same interview the second time, uh, another thing he said that I'm like a surgeon. I'm a professional first, so if you give me a problem, I'll solve the problem for you to the best of my abilities. And then I suddenly started thinking about uh, comparing what is expected out of a surgeon as a professional to what may be expected out of us human beings in our personal relationships. Are we to treat, or why don't we treat each person in the same manner? Like a surgeon would treat each body in front of him in the same manner. And I thought I would write about it, but the words have not yet come to put this whole thing into action. So I generally, when something of this nature happens, I note my thoughts. I let them stay with me. If something comes out of it, brilliant. If nothing comes out of it, it's still all right. But the process has to be uh, slow. In case you have to be patient. You really have to be patient because not everyone may be good at expressing themselves at that very particular point in time when they're inspired or motivated. Time elapses and you may really be able to put something better on paper instead of forcing it out of you.
Hmm.
But having said that, that's how I see poetry now. Earlier, it was about just getting it out. It was a, it was then a mode of expression, manner of expression. It continues to be a manner of expression. But I would like to write now. I would like to write something which I would like to go back and read, as opposed to just write for the sake of writing it. So over the last 6 months, uh, I have written lesser, but I'm more satisfied with what I've written. I've never been, um, barring one or two occasions, I've never been completely satisfied with what I've written. Another thing which is a very integral part of my process is to go back and read old poems and to go and read new poems. And not just poems, essays, any kind of writing, any kind of other art which appeals to me. Just stay around these elements so that somewhere along the line you may want to pick something, something may inspire you, something may motivate you, and then the process of writing can begin. And just because Ankur mentioned the Raven, I could not resist the temptation to pull out my 12th standard book, and I had Raven. I had made some
Shit.
detailed notes about it, and very good collection of poetry in this book called Starlight. Uh, and I had one in ninth and 10th. It's called Whispers of Immortality. Both of these books have some brilliant poems. And, whenever I'm stuck somewhere, normally pick one of these two books. Uh, and if nothing ever works, then almost anything ever written by Robert Frost works for me. It's always deeply satisfying to read it.
That's amazing, man. That's amazing. And you made some really great points about how
Just
writing changed for you.
What
Yeah.
a
one more
throwback.
point.
You want to go ahead?
One more point.
Yes, please.
Ryan mentioned that in the workshop which he attended.
Yeah.
It was a writing workshop. I have attended a few poetry workshops.
Right.
Uh, what he said about if you are wanting to publish a piece of work, be it your social media or you're thinking long term something bigger in form of a book, ebook, whatever it is, then it is always better to let it stay, not rush it through. Because what you feel is the greatest piece of work the world has ever seen in this moment is in all probability not the greatest piece of work. So you need to be comfortable with it over a period of time, and you need to just let it simmer on the surface around you, and you'll go back and perhaps you'll want to make some changes, and those changes may be for the good. So I agree with Ryan uh, on that point, and on the point of critiquing, it's really about whether you are into it as a professional or you are doing it for your personal interest. If you are doing it only as a personal manner of expression, then you would not want anyone to criticize it in any case, and you perhaps are not putting yourself in a place where people are going to criticize it. But if you're writing it from a professional perspective, you want to sell it. Unfortunately, you can't sell much poetry these days.
Yeah.
That's either poets live in penury. I mean, they have to do other things. Like Gulzar is a poet, was a screenwriter, script writer, director, lyricist. But he has written a lot of poems, and fortunately, my father loves poetry. He writes Hindi poetry, so and he loves reading and reading Hindi and Urdu poetry. So
Right.
Gulzar was the first name which came to my mind because I always find one more book written by him. He's written so much. Yeah, he's 80 plus, so he has been writing maybe since his 20s. But if he is putting out his work, then he is going to be critiqued,
Yeah.
whether he likes it or not, whether critiquing is right or not. He's going to be critiqued if a writer can take anything away from the criticism, and sometimes they can because uh, the writer may want to improve,
Yeah.
irrespective of how good the story may be or the plot may be. There may be something better which he may have missed out, or she they may have missed out. So to that extent, criticism is helpful if you're doing it to the especially if you're doing this
Doing it as
professionally.
Right.
a.
Thank you, Rhythm Bhai. Praveen, you've been trying to say something since Rhythm has been talking. Please go ahead, Bhai. And then we have a question, and we'll try to close our table discussion of that question, and we'll try to close it in the next 10 to 15 minutes. 15 minutes probably.
Okay.
Please go ahead, Praveen.
Okay. So I also had this thing about creativity as a concept. Like
Hmm.
जो writer's block वाला, as Rhythm said, writer's block, they don't know how, like he doesn't know how people get out of it. I think a lot of it has to do with just constantly doing it, like regardless of whatever you do, just keep on doing it, doing it, doing it to the point you turn out something nice, and then you're like, okay, okay, हाँ, ठीक है, अब मिल गया momentum मिल गया, now you pick on it and you keep on going.
Hmm.
It's basically you just don't stop.
Okay.
That's what I think. It's basically creativity is also like a muscle that you flex.
Right.
So the more you work it out, the more better you get.
Ankur wants to
Yeah,
say
yeah, Ankur,
something.
Ankur, Ankur, Ankur.
Yeah, I just want to mention one thing, give an analogy of what you just said. यार देखो ऐसे तो गधा और खच्चर भी सामान उठा के हार्ड वर्क करते रहते हैं सारा टाइम. They would hit one, success point out of the 100 or 1,000 given the probability. So this is like quite the closest analogy I could come up with what you just said. Ki that creativity doesn't necessarily mean you just keep on doing whatever you have to, and you would eventually end up getting what you were aiming at. That is just like a probabilistic case.
Yeah,
Please go
okay.
ahead.
So, as you just said, Ghada and Ghoda wala shit, right? So, there's this thing like, Ghode jo hote hain, the second they fall, they get shot in the head because they don't get up from that, right? गधे हैं चलते रहते हैं हाथ टांग टूट गए they just keep on going ठीक है so it depends on really how you see it
Rhythm bhai, do you have an
No,
opinion?
sorry, Ryan.
Please go ahead. Please go ahead.
I was just mentioning like Gada and Khachar only, so they are the same family. I wasn't mentioning Ghoda.
Mm, अच्छा अच्छा. Okay. Khachar is
हाँ,
half घोड़ा. So.
हाँ, तो मतलब the family more towards that. But yeah, the entire thing with that is that the necessity and the context of it. So if
Yeah.
you are in, let's say, a creative designing job and you are
Mhm.
forced to create something, that is the necessity of it. Otherwise, you will get fired. तो वही
Yeah.
घोड़े को गोली मारने वाली बात होगी.
Wait. You fall. You're like bam.
Yeah.
Cap.
So I don't see the point of creativity in it. It is more driven by the necessity than the free flow of creativity in itself.
Rhythm bhai, do you have a opinion on this matter?
Okay.
This particular idea?
uh, what Praveen said, that even when you're not able to get something out of you, you keep trying to get something out of you.
Hmm.
It may actually work for some people. Uh, and Ankur said that if it is a necessity, like you're in a job which demands you to have, if, for example, let's just take, I'm not taking an example of a poet or writer, but a cartoonist. Manjul is a very popular cartoonist.
Right.
Every day he has to give something for a publication in whichever newspaper he's attached to. I don't know which he's attached to right now. But uh, whether every day will be his best work, no, because as we all know, and Ankur also pointed out, that you can't get out of something every day, let alone something good every day. So Manjul, out of necessity, is giving something every day, but maybe his cartoon on Monday is far better than his cartoon on Saturday. But that, as Ankur said, requires him to do it as a job, and that's why he's doing. Praveen also was making a similar point actually, that if you're required to do it, if you're required to do it, or if you yourself have set a target, ki, I have to submit my first manuscript to the publishers by such and such date. It's a self-imposed one. If you're going to stick to it, every day you are going to just sit at the table and write something, and hope that you will find your way along all the crumpled sheets of paper surrounding
Right.
you. You're really hoping for that. It's like
Yeah.
a
Like
shot
was
in the
just
dark.
take the wheel.
मैं करते जा रहा हूँ ना, मतलब देखते हैं अब फिर क्या होता है.
Right.
uh, for some people it may just be, as speakers tell
Yeah.
you across the world, that sometimes you just need to lie down,
Yeah.
and in your moment of peace, in your moment of rest, you have a eureka moment, maybe, I don't know.
Right.
uh, if you have that, you have that. It works very differently for
Yeah.
everyone. I don't think there's a straight jacket formula
Right.
that can be applied to everyone.
Right. Sorry, guys, my camera fell off.
Yeah.
So,
Ankur was saying something, about to say something,
please.
Yeah.
and then
Yeah,
we'll
so
go to the.
I just have like a couple of points to mention, and to what you just said. Ki first of all is that that spark or the eureka moment is as random as it can get. That sense of inspiration can happen anytime, anywhere. मेरे केस में क्या होता है, like personally what I like to do is I like to keep a separate diary or a notepad for just the ideas. Ki whenever I'm like I go about my day every day, not with the purpose or aim of finding inspiration. I just go subconsciously about my day as it is. कि जैसा है वैसा है. It's going. I'm not looking for anything. So out of it could be happening at the most random of the places. It's like a couple is walking with an umbrella in a rain in a busy road. That would give me an idea about something to write. Like there have been so many incidents like this कि मेरे साथ ऐसे होता है, and I just write the ideas down. I'll give you an example. I got an idea slash inspiration in my dream, and when I woke up, I remembered that dream. So, and it was quite a philosophical thing, and I wrote that idea down. And then after few months, I wrote a poem about it. So that idea was to balance the balance, you need chaos. So it's way too philosophical if you go and sit and think about it. So I just had this idea in my dream. I woke up and thankfully I remembered that, and then I wrote it down, And after a few months, when I realized ki, now I'm feeling something about it, and I have certain things which I would like to write about it, and then I started writing. So this had happened with me, I think, a few months ago, when I had this idea to write about anticipation, that feeling, that sense of anticipation itself. So I just wrote that idea down, and after a few months, when I realized ki these are some analogies which I can use, and try to talk about anticipation itself, where it lies, and the subtleties of life. So after a few months, I wrote that poem. So that's how I go about it. You can get inspiration at the random places. And another thing, about which Rhythm mentioned some time ago, how do writers cope up with this writer's block? Uh, I have interacted with quite a few writers, and I had the opportunity to talk to them. I don't know if you guys are aware of Oshang Merchant. He is in his 70s now. He was the first Indian poet who came out of the closet during his time. And he did his master's from, I think, Purdue University on an ISNL. So he's a really good writer. He's a really good poet. And I have had the privilege to sit and eat pizza with him in Hyderabad. So I talked to him about a couple of things here and there. And I realized from all that I've talked with writers, or self-acclaimed writers, is that they, most of them, they force themselves to write, like एज अ नेसेसिटी, कि वो उनकी तो नौकरी है कि दे हैव टू कम अप विद समथिंग. सो वो उनका इतना एक हैबिट बन गया है where they would just sit and write. For they literally have become machines. Most of today's writers have become machines in terms that they just want to generate content because their life depends on it, like literally lives depend on it. So what they do is ki, if I'm working on one specific project, I will sit and write, devote specific hours of my day to that project. अगर मेरा वो writer's block आ गया, I've hit the threshold कि मेरे से अब इसके बारे में नहीं सोचा जा रहा है, cannot write about it, they would pick up a different project, or they would look for different opportunities which would bring in some money, and they would start writing about that. So that अगर मेरा दिमाग इधर नहीं लग रहा, I can utilize it somewhere, so that that source of sustainability in life is still there. So this is quite the mechanism which most of the writers follow, and I find it funny, to be honest. I mean, you are not creating quality content, no offense to anyone, but and this is something which I wanted to mention कि आज के time में mediocrity is on the high. आज के time में you see a lot of writers, poets, even musicians, artists, mediocre shit has been spread all along. It is being, venerated and appreciated. People have been
It's
fed up with this with so much, and they like to consume it, and that's why it is in the demand as well. So this has become like a cycle altogether.
I think it has a lot to do about the fact that there is a abundance of this thing and people being able to access like other people's work to a point where people have to churn out mediocre content. It's mostly because like if you have to stay relevant, you have to actually just churn out content. वरना तुम नाम like you'll be erased from their memories. सबका attention span है जितना अगर तुम churn out नहीं करोगे, they're like who is this? Who is this? So yeah, I think that's the thing.
That's what I was saying. It's like a cyclic process, hand in hand हो गया है कि because उसकी demand बढ़ गई है तो वो supply भी eventually बढ़ी गई है उसकी. So
वही क्वालिटी ओवर क्वांटिटी के बदले अभी क्वांटिटी ओवर
quantity over
क्वालिटी.
quality, ये बहुत सालों से चल रहा है. Like before
Yeah,
the stream, I was mentioning to Ryan that I was reading this essay by Arthur Schopenhauer. He was a German philosopher in 19th century. So he had an
Nine.
essay. So
He just
he
said
had an
9.
I had to.
Yeah,
So
please go ahead.
he had an essay. The title was on reading and books, where he mentioned ki how not to read and what not to read, because he wrote it like said 2 centuries ago कि mediocrity बहुत आ गई है market में. So you have to be very specific in picking out things or text or music or art that would help you grow as a person, not just for the sake of reason कि हाँ चलो मैंने. Because आज के टाइम में ये होता है, you pick up a poetry book by any in like today's writer. I just don't want to like to mention names, but
Name
one
any
of the
name.
but but one of the names rhymes with Bulbasaur. So Yeah, so I was saying you pick up certain books of today's writers, they would go and you could finish the entire book in half an hour, barely half an hour. You see these micro poetries and these easy texts of literature. You barely spend more than 2 minutes on one piece, and you are like, "कि हाँ चलो ठीक है, पढ़ा resonate हुआ, it feels nice, and you just move on." But ironically, आज के टाइम में यही ज़्यादा बिक रहा है, as Praveen was saying कि भाई इसकी डिमांड है तो attention span के हिसाब से this is the best
Yeah,
best thing.
it went
So, ठीक है भाई, it's
it went from Ramayan to Ekta Ranja Ekta Rani दोनों मर के खत्म कहानी basically.
I want to understand Rhythm's opinion. I think Ankur's internet has flashed out for a moment. Let's take Rhythm's opinion on this.
No, I agree with Ankur
Yeah.
that a lot of mediocre content is churned out, and
Mm.
people try to make money out of it because that is the demand.
Mm.
The, and we are audience to a lot of mediocre content because there are a lot of avenues where such content can be shared.
Yeah.
What he said, and it's a podcast. I hope Ryan does not mind because it's his. Uh, Rupi Kaur, Rupi Kaur writes a lot of the Bulbasaur rhyming poet. Rupi Kaur writes a lot of poems. I think she recently came out with another book. And what I find is, I don't claim to have read everything she has written, but when she started out, uh, when she started out, I think there was more effort going into the content at that point in time. I have no qualms with reading micro poetries. I enjoy reading the traditional micro poetries like haikus and tankas.
Right.
They are 17, 21 syllable poems. I enjoy reading those also. But when you read a poem, uh, is it going to stay with you? Is the question I ask myself. I read a lot of poems through the day. Sometimes I read 6, 7 poems through the day on Instagram, subscribe to poetry newsletters, and so on and so forth. But you really wonder uh, about the quality because when you ask me today, do I remember uh, poems which come on the newsletter on Instagram? I can barely name two or three. The only poem which comes to my mind right now, I don't even remember the poet, unfortunately. Uh, but it comes to my mind because the title of the poem was quite different. It's called "A Litany of Insouciant." Sorry, that's my poem. "A Litany of Insouciant Feelings."
Right.
Uh, it's a very short poem,
Right.
maybe 3 verses or so, but it's been written very well. I got it on poems.org. I subscribed to their newsletter, so it came in the
Wow.
inbox 2 or 3 months ago. But since then, a lot of poems have come every day. 2 poems at least come, but you really don't remember any of it. It does not stay with you. It's the swipe and double tap world, as the
Yeah.
older generation wants to call it, which is true. That it has to be appealing in that moment, or forget about it. A couple of my friends have told me that if you have a different format, more people will pause to read
Yeah.
because if I'm posting it on Instagram, it's the visual appeal before the actual content
Yeah,
appeal.
yeah. Bright colors,
Yeah,
bro.
bright colors or somber colors or whatever it may be. If
Bright contrasting colors are the
design,
shit.
if the design does not, the whole scheme does not seem appealing, then you are not going to read it.
Right.
I won't read things on Instagram if I see a particular font and I'm like, अरे ये font में कौन लिखता है?
अरे
I'm like, let
पैपिरस
it go.
पैपिरस कौन इस्तेमाल करता है रे?
So yeah, it's true. It's a lot of mediocre content,
Yeah.
uh, and there's no problem with mediocre content. Personally, I don't have any problem with mediocre content. It's when it becomes scalable and it actually starts making a lot of money at the cost of other artists who may not be able to sell their art as effectively
Right.
because perhaps they don't have a good marketing team. Perhaps they don't have a sense of how a carousel on Instagram should look, what the how the colors should be, what the contrast should be, what font is to be used. So they are placed at an obvious disadvantage,
Hmm.
and perhaps we are missing out on a lot of good, because we are talking poetry, a lot of good poets just because they don't know how to display their work on the mediums which are most used by the world.
Right.
So
I kind of believe that it's an unfair game. It's an unfair world. It's always been as such. And if you can't make it, then you know what can nobody can do anything about you. There are great poets living right now and dying without anybody finding out any of their work. So that is always going to be there. Sadly, it actually did hurt my heart. Like when I said that statement, it hurts on the inside to say this. Unfortunately, guys, we are like crossed 1 hour already. We are 5 minutes ahead of it. I have just one quick question that Fahad, who's been listening to the podcast for quite some time, probably looking at us as well, not at my face, but he's asking one question that we were talking about a long time ago. He's saying that he wants to understand uh, if a writer is taking part in a competition, how to like digest that mentally, like because he also believes that art should not be judged, but then these kind of competitions exist and they have a certain role and some people get attracted to such things. None of these competitions are coming to my mind, but for example, if somebody is doing like a NaNoWriMo thing and somebody's getting a prize or something like that, so I just wanted to ask, I'll start with Ankur and then Rhythm, and we'll try to quickly contain it within the next 5 minutes. And then I have another question, after which there is a request for both of you guys to read your poetry, one of your favorite poetries, and then we close it. So we'll probably extend it by the next 15 minutes, I think. So let's quickly try to wind up these two questions. The first one is this, which I just talked about. Ankur bhai, let's start.
See, in today's time, you have a lot of opportunities to participate in these kind of contests. ये रोज ऑनलाइन कोई ना कोई कॉन्टेस्ट हो रहा है थ्रू आउट द ग्लोब एंड यू हैव लाइक द इंटरनेशनल पार्टिसिपेशन सो यू कैन पार्टिसिपेट इन एनी कॉन्टेस्ट बट द थिंग इज यू हैव टू अंडरस्टैंड कि उनकी रिक्वायरमेंट क्या है अगेन इट कम्स डाउन टू द नेसेसिटी पार्ट विच वी वर डिस्कसिंग कि अगर एक ऑर्गेनाइजेशन कॉम्पिटिशन ऑर्गेनाइज करवा रही है व्हाट इज देयर रिक्वायरमेंट फॉर इट they usually have their websites and they usually have their previous editions जिनमें उन्होंने competition के winners के pieces को वो किया हुआ है publish किया हुआ है so you can go and understand and get an idea कि what that
pattern
entire
recognition.
website or what that pattern recognition, it is quite visible there. Like you can go back there, go to their website, you can understand and you can get the idea of what the requirement of that competition and specific organization is. In most of the times, like मुझे भी काफी like a lot of people share with me a lot of competitions. I don't take part in them in most of them because most of them has specifically mentioned that they would prefer free verse over rhyming schemes and more structured poetries, and that's a big no for me. I'm like, if you are churning mediocre content, I'm sorry, I'm not participating in it altogether. So it depends on you. I see. I'm not against modern free words or the modern micro poetry thing. It's just that वो आज के time में इतना ज़्यादा हो गया है that everyone is consuming only that thing and they are forgetting what actual poetry used to be like, where you have to put your brain and heart in it to actually understand and see and observe. That you have to come back to it again. So it depends on you कि which particular aspect of poetry you are comfortable with. अगर आपको free verse or modern poetry अच्छी लगती है and you are more comfortable in it, please by all means indulge in that. खुद को उतना expose करो जितना literature available है. There are good writers in this genre as well. वो खुद को expose करो and then you try to see कि if you are participating in a competition कि उनका पर्पस क्या है, what is their requirement, because most of these contests that they are organizing, it's just for their own popularity and also a sense of competition with other organizations. That is most of the organizations purpose. जितने भी competitions हो रहे हैं उनका यही purpose है mostly. So you cannot judge art of course, but आज के time में it is that कि वो भी एक competition बन गया है. Everyone likes to take a part in it. Everyone likes to have poetry or a piece or a short story published in anthology. आज के time में बहुत easy and they are just providing you with platform for the sake कि भाई उनकी popularity बढ़ रही है. That's all.
Okay, bhai. That actually makes a lot of sense. I'm sorry, I'm trying to more to be a moderator than other things. We'll just quickly take Praveen has to say something, and then we'll move on to Rhythm's opinion about it.
I forgot what I had to say. Move on.
Rhythm, bhai, please go ahead and give me like 1 minute. I'll just
Yeah.
be back. Please go ahead.
So I think that these competitions, the organizations obviously have their own agenda, but some of these competitions are a little more genuine, and for a person who's looking to kickstart any sort of a career or to come into uh, some kind of recognition, so that he can kickstart his career, or there's a push to his career or her career. Uh, they are really important. They are really important. I don't know how many competitions have big. They may tell you that they'll publish it on their pages and they'll promote you on their social media. I don't know how many competitions have prize money. Some do. Some of them do. I'm aware of that. Uh, and the whole concept of poetry competitions is very old. In fact, I was reading about a very famous poet by the name American poet by the name of Edna Saint Vincent Millay. Uh, I think she was born in the late 1880s or so, or slightly before that, and she had taken part in a competition when she was only a teenager, and she wrote a wonderful poem. I can't recollect the name right now. A very long poem, and she didn't win. She didn't win. She didn't have a podium finish, but the prize was a substantial amount of money. And given that poetry books do not sell like novels would, a poet needs that kind of security from time to time, so that the poet can actually the poets can immerse themselves into the art instead of worrying where is the next paycheck coming from. Having said that, most poets are worrying where is the next paycheck coming from, but from time to time, as I said, having that kind of security, it would be very helpful. And I think that would allow poets to have more time to pursue uh,
I mean,
art.
basically, you're saying there needs to be a society who just pays for poets who are trying to do some shit and just have some sort of security so that they can
No,
churn up
it's
better
not
shit.
that not trying to pay for pay the poets. They are legitimate
नहीं नहीं
competitions.
I'm
It
saying
won't
कि
be a constant source of income.
हाँ like so that they're like उनको अपने सर्वाइवल के बारे में सोच के अपने आर्ट पे कॉम्प्रोमाइज ना करना पड़े ऐसा
Yeah,
एक कुछ माध्यम
that's a
होना चाहिए
very that's in a very ideal world. But to the
yeah of
extent
course
it keeps happening, you know, I would always be a promoter of any such events, where serious events, not आज मुझे मैसेज आया कि आप 100 रुपये दो तो आप पार्टी हम आपकी पोएम पब्लिश कर लेंगे.
पब्लिश कर देंगे
हाँ, वैसा वाला नहीं चाहिए कि हम हमारे पेज में पोस्ट कर देंगे आपकी पोएम, आप जीतो ना जीतो
इन्फ्लुएंसर मॉडल
Yes.
That
So,
was so
but yeah, I
bad.
think
Yeah.
the competitions are the serious competitions. They should be kept going. I don't know who are the people giving, these organization grants, but we are very thankful for them, whoever they are.
Right. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Rhythm bhai, I did not hear the whole concept, but thank you to Praveen that he actually was able to summarize it in our like stupid ooga booga language.
उगा उगा
Praveen bhai, do you remember the point that you had, or have you?
oh yeah I just remembered it so
Please.
uh, what I was saying is like we were discussing on the topic about competitive writing and shit right
Right.
in competitions and stuff so I think a lot like in competitions that a lot has to deal with the like lot has to matter regarding the whole people you're writing for like basically knowing your audience is key in competitions if you know your audience you can cater like to them in that specific way तुम्हें पता है कि हाँ ये लोग ऐसे हैं इस कंपनी का ये मॉडल है और इसके रिलेटेड कुछ भी लाइक यू फाइंड 5 keywords related to that you fit it in ऐसे ऐसे घुसा दो and you're like set so that's like SEO SEO for
और द बेस्ट थिंग इज फेमिनिज्म पे लिख दो वो सब जगह बिकता है.
all along
That is
to all
sad,
my feminist
actually.
brothers out there we will rise
All right, guys. okay, so I have this last question that I will take again the route of Ankur, Rhythm, and then Praveen, which is how to deal with creative block.
How to deal with
Creative block.
creative block or writer's block.
Yeah, if you have a if you're not if you want to write poetry, if you want to or probably um, whatever kind of creative, I think it's more of a generalized question कि अगर
Generalized question.
कि आपको
So
creative block होता है, but obviously we're going to talk about it in poetry terms.
no, मैं generalize भी बोल सकता हूँ
जी,
because my approach is same.
okay,
See, because as I was saying कि creativity comes to you naturally, right? So there is no point in rushing towards it or to achieve it. So that's the thing that I follow. I don't, if I'm not able to write or create something, but I have this urge that nahi yaar, I'm not satisfied with this, I want to create something, I don't rush after it. I just let it come to me because वो naturally आपके पास आ ही जाएगी. It's just that you have to be aware yourself कि if I am just as, and again this is another thing कि which I was saying, it comes as randomly to you as it can. So you never know कि it could come to you next day, next month, or even next year. There's no point in rushing towards it to surpass that or overcome that void of
right,
not being creative. And it also depends on the fact कि uh, what is the necessity of it. If you're just creating for the sake of creation, you are not under any pressure, like your life doesn't depend on it, then you should never rush for it. It's like ठीक है यार, let it take time, let allow yourself to take time to grow, and it would eventually come to you, and it always does. वो लगता है कि नहीं आ रहा है एंड यू फील प्रेशराइज कि बाकी लोग इतना क्रिएटिव काम कर रहे हैं, मैं नहीं कर पा रहा हूँ, आई हैव टू डू समथिंग अबाउट इट. नो, that would only drive you in the opposite direction, and it will exacerbate things for you. So you should never go for that. हाँ, अगर if you are in that zone where जहाँ पे तुम्हारी necessity है, where you have to be creative to bring out something as a final product, and your life depends on it, then you have to see and understand कि भाई मैं कहाँ कहाँ पे अपने आप को force कर सकता हूँ, because again that is the only approach that you can apply, because your life depends on it, because आपकी वो necessity है, then you have to bring it out somewhere. Of course वो output और satisfaction उतना नहीं होगा जितना naturally आता है, but that is, I think, the best thing you could do in that situation.
perfect. Rhythm bhai, do you have anything to say?
Before Rhythm says anything, his image is like very smart. Like वो Scrabble खेल रहा है. He's like,
हाँ.
oh, I know words, bitch.
It's all about the image. It's all about the image. Guys, before you go ahead, Mahima has joined us here. Hi, Mahima. Thank you for being here. And Mahima
Hi,
has
Mahima.
answered the whole question in one single word, which is inspiration. Like how to deal
Yeah.
with creative block? Inspiration. That's her answer. So, yeah, please, Praveen.
Yeah. Rhythm was saying. So I'll keep my point pinned here. Like right here, it's pinned here. Now Rhythm will talk.
No, I have not much to add after what Ankur has said. That if your life depends on it, then you will find inspiration in an ant crawling across the floor. So if your life depends on it, then yeah, you have to keep at it. You have to go hammer and tongs on it until you find something. If your life does not depend on it, then you are actually placed at an advantage. You're writing for yourself. You're writing for your satisfaction. If you want to vomit it out, you vomit it out. If you don't want to vomit it out, you can wait for the day when it's ready to come out on its own. So that block which writers have is obviously going to be dealt with differently by professionals and non-professionals. If you know, from all the professionals whom I've heard, and as Ankur, recounted his experience with a famous poet, whom he shared pizza with. Uh, they just keep writing. They just keep writing till they reach a point where they think that this is going to make some headway with their readers. So that's what you do. That's the only thing you can do. So that's I don't think anything further to add.
Beautiful, beautiful. Please.
Okay.
Praveen.
So taking the pin out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, so as Ankur and Rhythm both mentioned,
Yeah.
like it basically depends on what your end goal is, right?
Hmm.
So for this scenario, for the specific scenario where you have no pressure on you, like financially तुम settle हो, you're well off, you don't need money from the poetry to actually survive and shit, and those time you're in a creative rut or creative block.
Hmm.
तब भी, as I said, you keep on, like you keep going, because देखो, regardless of how uncreative a creative person tries to be, right, or is at that given point in time,
Hmm.
एक person genius निकलता है, ठीक है? Give it time, तुम लिखते रहो, like acclimate करो उस चीज से धीरे धीरे. You have shit, like 10 दिन लिखा, लिखा हाँ भाई, एक दिन पहले जो लिखा था उसमें कुछ मिला, एक लाइन निकाल लो उसमें से. You take shit from, like, whenever an idea comes to you, you just jot it down, like be it stupid, be it not stupid, be it good, be it bad. So that's basically how you deal with creative.
I want to just show something regarding this point because it's come up for the twice, the second time. This is my journal. This is my idea book, the kind of book that Ankur kind of refers. This is the planning, but this leads to a lot of paralysis, by the way. And then this is the to-do list. So I have like so many things, and then I have like post-its. So all I wanted to say was that writing down ideas and actually waiting for the inspiration to strike is amazing. I often chastise myself and I feel bad about it that, oh, are you not able to write? But to be really honest, inspiration makes sense, and finding it in anywhere that, as Rhythm says, also makes sense. Like, but the conditions should be right. Like, yeah. So that also makes sense. So it's overall a great series of answers for this question. Do you guys have, Ankur and Rhythm, do you guys have your poems ready that you want to share with us?
Pressure.
Do you want us to share our own poems or our favorite one by our favorite writers?
So the
Read
request,
something that you have read you like,
yeah, the request is that you guys share what you wrote.
and you are like you like basically. तुम्हें पसंद है.
रुक जाओ ढूंढनी पड़ेगी.
Ankur is like how to kill oneself on stream.
नहीं. I'm comfortable sharing my stuff. भाई,
My
मैं
death
तो
is the greatest poetry ever written.
Rhythm, do you have
Rhythm,
something
you can
ready?
go ahead.
Please go ahead.
If you have one, please share.
It would
I'm
be an
actually
honor.
looking for something as we speak.
Please.
I'm banking on Ankur to start alphabetically speaking.
देखो
मैं-
वाइवा में यही प्रॉब्लम होती है.
मैं सुनाता हूँ.
Pressure.
मैं
That's
उसको
what I
बोला
said,
तू
performance
मेरी
anxiety
लैला.
है भाई.
Sorry, we're talking over each other.
अपन बोला
Yeah,
तू मेरी लैला.
that is my poetry. Please go ahead. I haven't been writing for quite some time now, but just for being a sport, I'll also quickly find something. Praveen, do you have something? Let's hear it.
I don't. I have not written like anything that's like I've jotted down like a bunch of rubbish in the past 5 years. I've not written anything.
कुछ
like
भी ऐसा है
solid
मेरे
in
को
my life.
छोड़ के चली गई और मैं उसको देख लूंगा और this type of thing.
भाई हाँ भाई है भाई cringe है भाई नहीं पढ़ सकता भाई. Cannot do that to myself. As we were discussing, like तुम बोल रहा था ना कि Ankur and Rhythm will read. I was actually like looking at my Google Drive कि भाई क्या चीज़ आप लिखा है 5 साल पहले देखो. I was like, oh no, this does not deserve to be outside. Kill
Yeah,
it.
Praveen
Fire.
is like roses are red, violets are blue. I can't poetry. Good night to you.
Fuck you. No.
Okay, gentlemen, I'll just quickly read this one. I have several, but they're very cheesy, so I'll just read the smallest one, which I wrote like a long time ago. This is 2015 or something. This one is called No Gray. Okay, it's about chess basically. 64 square boxes, all black and white like myself, and trapped in its own play with those same moves over and over again. I play life like the game, from one square to another, or one end to the other. Why can't I move away? Why not some other way? The same characters always. Sometimes I play king, and the other times I am the pawn. I play life like the game, 64 square boxes, all black and white like myself, no grey. So,
Really like the concept.
thanks, man. Thanks.
chess
I
and
actually, I like to me this whole was like Arya Par wala scenario tha mere liye. This whole the feeling of the poem was more like Arya Par wali baat. Ki there is no gray zone. Like you're either here or there, nowhere in the middle. Of course, I'm all about it.
duality.
Oh, do
Thank you, Fahad Bhai. Mahima is saying, do you guys follow button poetry?
Yes, I do.
Okay, let's talk about that quickly later on. Vandana is saying, Praveen, padhna. Thank you, Vandana.
no.
Okay, you guys handle it later. किसके
Yes,
पास
we will.
तैयार है भाई? Market is open now. Who wants to go first? Mr. Ankur, do you have your poetry ready?
I do.
Please go ahead, sir.
Viva में
I do.
option नहीं है और कोई.
Are please go ahead, sir.
Uncle was like, I do.
There's a gun. There is a gun down here. Please don't.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I mentioned this poem in our previous conversation. I told you about the idea of anticipation,
Right.
and I had this idea that I want to write about anticipation in itself and where it is found. So I wrote a few verses and I write rhyming poetry. I don't find satisfaction personally in free verse, and
Yeah.
मजा आता है. मजा आता है bro. मजा आता है.
yeah, but with me, until unless it is structured and I'm following the syllabic pentameters and all the meters and the specific rhyming schemes, I find satisfaction in that because it is a mental exercise for the writer itself.
Right.
So when the poem is finished, I find myself quite satisfied. So the poem, like the title is A Poem to Anticipation. And it goes like this: to not speak biological glitch, but emotional responsive twitch. I seek those denied, dimensions you hide, all of the looming weather stitched, transmuting life's pages enriched, gush of yearn beside, where your hum resides. I find you in the pearl down the eye, of Viloma's conscience they deny, voids in attic to keep, songs for me to weep. You home in smiles of death's comply, in shallow ponds and enslaved sky. Mortals hope of leap to sow what you reap. I look for you in parallels of rail, in goodbye kisses the smoke and trails. To arrive apart, surreptitious hearts await to read your words in mail. Ears hold the whistling in detail. Conjoined or apart, all but needless art. Aren't you within melodious tune, a note prior to Beethoven's moon, or in a new prose that your lover arose? You are the first touch, but immune. Honeycomb's first drop in May's afternoon, your lover grows, waiting to be composed. Your forever abode is mind's own rue, as monochrome snorts flamboyant hues. I hear you in cries of battles we try. How I wish for it to subdue. A clockwork anemic undo, entangled implies our fates rely. Too ambitious to seek, to devout, alas, all for liberation, or too long for what I write about.
Wow. Talia,
Good
Talia.
shit. Good shit.
This is crazy shit, man.
Oh, मजा आ गया.
Fuck. That was crazy. By the way, I was showing you guys कि मेरे छाती पे लिखा है reap what you sow. sorry. I should have done it later. Please, Rhythm bhai.
Subtitles दे रहा था. तू अपनी छाती से subtitles दे रहा था.
गजनी बना हुआ भाई.
Mohammad Fahad is saying crazy. Ankur Chhabra के
He
लिए.
has written buy milk. Buy milk eggs.
Rhythm bhai.
To do list
To-do
उसकी
list, yeah.
डायरी नहीं उसकी बॉडी है.
Full part.
Please, sir. Rhythm bhai.
I'll
Go ahead.
I'll have to share it on the screen. because
Amazing.
There was an
Go ahead.
image which I saw. and
I don't know if that is going to work though, but let's try it.
Okay,
Because-
let's see, man. Yeah, let's go.
Yeah. Maybe if you can just let's try it once and then we'll fix it if it's a problem. Please go ahead.
Okay, then.
Vandana says so good about Mr. Ankur. Ankur bhai सच में यार फोड़ दिया आपने फोड़ दिया. Very good. Very nice.
I'm
Okay.
not sure if you guys can see my screen.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, we can.
We can see.
Okay.
Yeah, it works. Yeah.
Works?
Go ahead.
Okay. just start reading it. I don't think the text is visible on the screen. It's
Can
very
you,
small.
yeah, can you zoom into that, bhai, please? Can you zoom in?
Is it any better? I have
Yeah,
zoomed
yeah,
in a little.
amazing, amazing, amazing. It is
Yeah,
better than
works.
before. हम लोग को तो कॉल में बहुत साफ दिखाई देगा, but I think people would not be able to see it very clearly.
Yes,
But please go
I'll
ahead.
just read it out.
Yeah.
Because if you're fast internet,
In the valley, silent wails pierce through years, but in the fall, red, orange, yellow mauve leaves play a forgotten arabesque. In the valley, streets are stained with blood which no longer flows, but in the fall, red, orange, yellow mauve leaves paint life into the floors. In the valley, it is always cold, but in the fall, red, orange, yellow mauve leaves warm hardened hearts and souls. In the valley, death is spoken as a matter of life, but when the chinar leaves fall momentarily, the valley springs back to life. In Kashmir, the chinar leaves fall.
तालियां,
Arabesque is
तालियां,
such a
तालियां.
beautiful word.
Yeah, man.
don't type P, don't type P.
Silent
कंपनी
here, what
कंपनी आ गई
Praveen
है
was
तो
saying.
Sustainable finance.
Subtle plug by Rhythm again.
प्रवीण
Sorry,
भाई
I wanted to
थोड़ा सा
show
माइक
this.
से दूर रहना भाई.
It's an
It's quite okay.
it's
We
an
are able to hear
Islamic
you.
concept only.
Go ahead, please.
Arbis symbolizes the unity of belief and the perception of the traditional Islamic culture. For many Muslims, Arbis reflects the absolute power of Allah.
it's a really beautiful word. And
So
it's a lovely poem too.
yeah, it's amazing. Vandana is saying 100, 100, 100. Keep it 100. Mohammed Fadil is saying
Right.
now it is my goal to write something like Ankur did. That's some inspirational stuff.
Shit.
Bhai, you guys are like you. Both the poems were like in a different category, but they were so well written. It's
So
just
good, man.
it was just really nice, man. It's just very inspirational stuff, and I think all of us in the chat are inspired, and I am as well. So yeah,
I just want to ask
please
Yeah.
go
one
ahead.
thing.
Please go
I
ahead.
just want to ask one thing from all three of you and all the people in the chat, that if there is one poet that you have your favorite, or one specific book, or any piece of poetry that you would like us to read, please do share.
Please, guys, chat. If you have anything that you want to say, please go ahead. We have like 3 more minutes before I end this. Unfortunately, we've overstepped bounds. The reason I want to keep it concise, I do not want to
Bounce? What do you mean bounce?
keep it in its bounds. I do not want to overstep what your opinions are. But unfortunately, keeping this content together is also extremely important to us. Rhythm bhai, are you saying something?
Yeah, I was saying that there's one very short poem. Ankur asked, whom do we normally read? You can put it in the chat box for us. I really enjoy reading Robert Frost and also Edna St. Vincent Millay from the older generation of poems. From the contemporary poets, and I think one of them is dead already. No. So I like Mary Oliver and Wendell Berry. Uh, Unfortunately, I haven't read many Indian poets, English poets, English language poets from India. But there's a Malayali poet. She's no more. She used to write in English and
You said Malayali?
Malayalam. Kamla Das.
Oh, yeah.
And for a smaller group over here, and for Ankur, in our chat, I'm just going to post a link to one of her poems.
Please go
A
ahead.
very short poem. I've just done it. It's called Maggots.
Wow.
It's barely 7 lines.
Okay.
Yeah, I've read
I
that.
think Ankur would. Yes.
Beautiful. I haven't read it.
Kamla Das also used to. She
Yeah.
was primarily a writer. She didn't write a lot of poetry, but still a lot more than most poets you would now come across.
Ankur bhai? I think Ankur
What?
Bhai's internet has
Yeah.
struck a
वो
problem.
इतनी
He'll
देर से बोल रहा
Yeah.
था इंटरनेट उसका करके.
it will
Guess what?
probably be back, but I'll just read some things that Mohammad Fad is saying. Mirza Ghalib, Mahima Shukla says in the inappropriate poem by Sonal Sharma, Sonel. It's in the chat. She's her friend, and I'm going to give it a read as soon as we finish this. I have a meeting upcoming, so we'll have to end this very soon. I put some names in the chat. भाई Rhythm भाई आप जाके उसमें और भी नाम ऐड कर सकते हो in the chat if you want to, if you have the feeling, of probably from your phone. Mohammad Fawad is also saying, and recently heard Yaha, and I read Ashish Bagareja. And I've pasted the link to the poem that he pasted in the live chat, as you guys saw, in the chat as well. Ankur Bhai is back.
Sorry guys, I
Ankur
went
is
away.
back. कहाँ गया भाई? कहाँ गया था? सच बता.
इंटरनेट चला गया था.
यही
नहीं,
बोलेगा, मेरे को पता था.
इतनी जल्दी कुछ नहीं होने वाला जितनी देर में गया था मैं.
Mahima is also saying she likes Olivia
I am
Gatwood.
Sorry Ryan, you
Yeah,
were saying?
Mahima was saying that.
Mahima is saying that she likes Olivia Gatwood as well. आप लोगों ने पढ़ा है क्या Olivia Gatwood? No, this is not the first time I'm hearing it. Thank you so much, Mahima. I'll definitely give it a read. It's on the chat. I suggest you guys also do the same. Ankur bhai, आप अपने inspirations या favorite writer या कोई एक particular piece of poetry that आप समझाना चाहते हैं वो please आप बताएं.
There are a lot of poems and writers which I would like to suggest to everyone. First is W.H. Auden.
Okay.
He was a tremendous writer. And another more recent one is Wisława Szymborska. She was a Polish writer and she won the Nobel Prize as well. Her poem Love at First Sight is really amazing, and she writes in free verse. So there are a lot of writers whose free verse poetry I enjoy. So she is one of those writers, Wisława Szymborska, and Love at First Sight specifically. And W.H. Auden ki there's one specific poem which I would like to suggest. And being an astronomer and person who writes, this poem is my favorite of his, which is called The More Loving One.
Okay.
The poem is called The More Loving One by W.H. Auden. And I would like to suggest John Keats and John Donne. Like if you want to go contemporary and the old school.
Right.
John Keats and John Donne.
Got it. भाई ये जो आपने कुछ चीजें बोली क्या आप इसको मुझे मैसेज कर सकते हो? I'll put it in the chat once this thing ends. I'll put it in the comments or I'll put it in the description.
मैं आपको WhatsApp पे भेज दूँ.
Okay, Praveen bhai, do you have something to add? Some kind of inspiration? Or something you want people to read?
Not really.
Fahad bhai, okay. Neither do I, and I'm also on a time crunch right now. Ryan bhai, thank you and your panel from my behalf. Thank you very much for sharing your experiences and tips to write, Mr. Fahad is saying. And before I leave, I would like to have one last opinion from you guys on whatever you want.
घुस जा कैमरे में घुस जा.
But I also have to show you that, look at this. There are like so many, the door is open, right? So there are just so many fucking
you
things here everywhere.
Is not to come. दरवाजा खुला रखा और तूने सोचा कि नहीं है.
Yeah.
बड़े बेट रहे.
So bhai log, any parting words and then we disconnect?
Nothing much.
I don't know.
जिंदगी ही पोएम है. कौन लिख रहा है, किस लिए लिख रहा है, किसी को नहीं पता, बस लिख रहा है.
Rhythm bhai, any parting words?
कोई पढ़ ले तो बस वाह कर लेना.
क्या बात.
Just don't stop writing.
क्या बात बोल रही प्रवीण.
Rhythm bhai is also saying just don't stop writing.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It doesn't matter. And don't stop writing, especially if you are pursuing it professionally.
I think guys, this has run its course. Thank you so much for guys for being here. People on the chat, people in the panel. It's amazingly beautiful that you guys gave almost 2 hours of your life to this thing, and it means a lot, and it's always going to be here. Vandana is saying keep creating inspirational stuff. Let's end it here. Thank you so much once again. I cannot thank you guys enough. It just my demeanor does not justify how I feel from the inside, but I really have to fuck off right now. Thank you and love you all. Bye bye. Take care.
All right. Bye bye. Good night.
Do you want
Have a happy
kisses
Sunday, everyone.
up close? Bye bye.
अरे मैं कैमरा के पास नहीं था यार. What is this? No, no, many.
I'm just ending the stream.